Rap albums with no skips. They're a pretty rare thing for me personally. As someone who is very open to criticizing the things that they like, there is at least one song on almost every album that I listen to that I would slam that skip button on. Even ones that I consider to be the greatest albums ever, some of them still have skippable songs. Whether that album is Good Kid Mad City by Kendrick Lamar or Food and Liquor by Lupe Fiasco. So it is pretty safe to say that the number of albums that I skip 0 songs on is very low. But they're not non-existent, so today I decided I would make a video to share my personal no-skip albums with you guys. Now, before we get into that, it's important to mention that I don't think every album in this video is perfect. There are albums that aren't on this list that I think are better than all of the ones that are on here, because having no skips just means that every song is pretty damn good, or all the songs are sort of tied together in a way that makes it more worth listening to the album as a whole than just taking individual tracks out of it and forgetting the rest. With most of these, it's a combination of those two things. That's not to take anything away from these albums that I'm about to talk about. I just wanted to say that so that you guys know that this isn't like a list of my favorite albums of all time or anything like that. But still, these 4 albums that I'm about to talk about are ones that I love, and I would wholeheartedly recommend each and every one of them if you haven't heard them. So with that being said, this is CDTVProductions. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram under that name. We're almost at 30k on Twitter. We're almost at 20k on Instagram, so I would appreciate you guys helping me out with that one. And let's talk about these albums.
Stick a middle class kid in a bad school, and that's me, the bad apple that dangled up on the fam's tree.
2 fun facts about this album. This was the first album that I heard from IDK, and it turned me into a fan. And it is one of the few albums that has genuinely brought a tear to my eye. But we'll talk more about that later. One of the things that makes this a no-skip album for me is the fact that it's a storytelling concept album, with each track providing to the story that IDK is telling about himself and how he landed in prison, and strongly tying that to the relationship that he had with his mother, which is really what the album is all about. And each track reveals more details and progresses the story— oh fuck, I didn't change the background. Okay, that's much better. With every track revealing more and progressing the story further. He released the album in 3 separate parts over the course of a few weeks, with each different part sort of representing a different chapter of the story. The first 3 tracks tell the tale of the influences and decisions that led IDK to robbing a pizza shop, the crime that eventually landed him in prison. Then, tracks 4 to 7 tell a reverse chronological story that illustrates how he treated women poorly in his younger days, and ties this into the overall theme of the album by briefly mentioning his mother disapproving of this behaviour. Then, the final stretch, tracks 8 to 11 dive into IDK's thoughts while he was in prison, and his relationship with his mother strengthening during this time before she unfortunately passed away, with IDK revealing that he never really got close to his mother earlier in her life because he feared getting close to her and then losing someone that he had a strong bond with. And this song where he talks about finally realizing that he was losing his mother and almost kind of talks to her in the song as if he's doing it while she floats away into the afterlife is beautiful, moving, and that is the track that brought me to tears on this album. Now guys, we need to keep that a secret between me and you, because we can't have the Tom McDonald fans finding out that I cried to some music, or else they're gonna call me a soy boy even more. Not only is it an incredibly touching track in its own right, but I can relate to the loss portrayed on this song, so it truly spoke to me and really hit close to home. The last minute and 20 seconds of Black Sheep White Dove struck me so powerfully that I couldn't help but cry a little.
Please don't say this what I think it is. Where you get them wings from, Mom? Where you get them wings from, pretty? Talk.
I still remember the first time I listened to that song. I actually DM'd IDK right after it, just like, wow, that was beautiful. He didn't see the DM, but it is what it is. I just wanted to let him know in case he did see it. Now, on top of being a good storytelling album, of course, from a sound perspective as well, this album is great. You've got a solid mix of dark bangers that still contain introspection, like Maryland Ass, Guy, Pizza Shop, and No Words.
Now everybody get up on the fucking ground, and if you make a sound, I might have to drown them with these rounds. Knowing I'm no killer, but fuck it, I'm trying to be that nigga.
Smooth, intimate tracks like Windows Up and Birds and the Bees.
You wanna get it, I'm me sliding. She said, we got so much time for that.
And softer, emotional tracks like Black Sheep, White Dove or No Shoes on the Rug.
But when my ass got caught, everybody went ghost. But the one that I used to think hated me the most, I love you, mama. Did you need a...
Even though these songs collectively tell a story, they still have insane replay value as individual tracks. If this sounds like something you would enjoy, I highly recommend checking it out because this album deserves a lot of recognition. My favourite 3 tracks on here would have to be Pizza Shop, No Shoes on the Rug, Leave Them at the Door, and Black Sheep, White Dove. But as you know by its inclusion here, nothing here is bad or a skip for me.
Run it, run it, run it, run it. I rock, I roll, I blow, I grow, I glow, I rock.
Let's take it back to the date on this world. Yeah, yeah. Run it, run it, run it. I can smell it in your eyes. That there's something more to say. Flower Boy is an album that I only very recently counted as an album with no skips. And the reason that I didn't before was because of one song. Glitter. But I think that was more out of not giving it multiple chances more than anything else, because usually I just hear that da-na-na-na-na at the start of the song, find it a bit annoying and click skip. But recently I actually gave it a chance for the first time in a very long time. And I realized I'd been sleeping on that song, cementing this as a no-skip album for me. What I love so much about Tyler albums, and what makes him one of my favourite artists, is how his projects are just dripping with so much personality. It's basically him letting you in on his own unique and vibrant perspective on the world. With Flower Boy, this results in a very colourful album. You've got all this recurring imagery throughout that strongly ties all the tracks together, whether it's metaphors centred around driving, or, as you would expect, flowers. He ties these flower-based and vehicular metaphors into representing real-life situations, such as potholes representing obstacles on your path to success, and of course, flowers mainly being used to represent personal growth, opening up and being yourself. This album really was a dive into Tyler's feelings, and that's exactly what he was aiming for with it. Tyler said that he wanted to make this album much more personal, especially after Cherry Bomb didn't touch on too many topics personal to him. And that very much comes through on the mostly short verses on here, with Tyler delving into themes like love, his sexuality, and loneliness. Pretty much every track peels back another layer of Tyler's brain and the feelings within, making each and every one essential. You see, Tyler the Creator is like an onion, and onions have layers. That's how the Shrek quote goes, right? The themes and consistency of this album just make it hard for me to find a reason to skip a single track on any listen. Even the entirely instrumental outro track, Enjoy Right Now Today, serves its purpose within the narrative. It just does its storytelling with instruments rather than vocals, and as someone who loves Tyler as a producer just as much as a rapper, I still thoroughly enjoyed this song. That song is basically the soundtrack that I picture playing in the scene depicted in this cover. And of course, there are still a couple moments on here that show Tyler's wild side that his older fans would be accustomed to, such as I Ain't Got Time, which, fun fact, was originally produced for Kanye West.
So I take the scenic passenger walk, boy, I look like River Phoenix first. Happy birthday! You bitch ass nigga, yup, I'm thirsty.
And Who Dat Boy, where you see that more outrageous side of Tyler. Overproduction that sounds like a horror movie score with intense 808s over it. Flower Boy just marked a very exciting and impressive moment in the evolution of Tyler as an artist. And while I haven't fully decided on it yet, this might just be my favourite Tyler album now. Ahead of Wolf and ahead of Igor. It's hard to pick, as with all these albums, but top 3 tracks on here for me are Where This Flower Blooms, Boredom, which has been the soundtrack to this pandemic, and November, which has also been the soundtrack to this pandemic. My November was when Corona didn't exist. Nah, I'm just joking, but I hope that caught some of you off guard though.
and trample shit while I stomp. A mud hole in that ass, cause I'm straight out the swamp. Creeping up on sight, now it's fight night.
To me, this is the perfect Wu album. It's one of those special albums that I only listen to every once in a while because I want it to have that full impact on me every time that I do choose to listen to it. The competitive spirit in the group is so apparent on here, and the stories about the recording process behind it just make that all the more clear. What the leader of the group, RZA, would do was make the other members compete in rap battles against each other to secure their spots on each song. This led to Killah Priest and Master Killa competing to be on the song The Mystery of Chessboxing, with neither of them being official Wu members at that point, and only one of them would go on to be. When Killah Priest fell asleep in the studio, Master Killa went into the booth, recorded his verse over the beat for the song, and that cemented his place on the track and within the group. Honestly, knowing some of the background behind this album just enhances the experience of listening to it even more, because it just shows how hungry all these artists were. Hell, it even feels like they are competing against each other on the individual songs, but competing in a collaborative way, where they work together to try and bring the best out of each other. And I think another thing that keeps each track interesting throughout is just the sheer fact that there is 9 members in the Wu-Tang Clan, with no 2 tracks containing the exact same combination of members on 36 Chambers. Each and every rapper in the group is distinct and provides something different to each song, making each and every one feel like a unique display of rapping, and providing an album that is just jam-packed full of highlight verses on every track. Every time ODB comes on, I have a smile on my face due to the no-holds-barred wildness that his verses exude. When Jizza comes on, I'm locked into every word he's saying. When Inspector Deck comes on, I'm focused on the technicality of his rhyming. U-God just has a booming voice that makes him stand out on his single verse on the album. Master Killa impresses with the bars on his only verse. Raekwon has some of the best storytelling verses on Cream and Can It Be Also Simple. Method Man provides some of the best hooks and slickest flows on here. Ghostface's intense delivery instantly grabs my attention and does not let go of it until his verses are done. And finally, RZA is the one who can be credited for producing every track here and creating the soundscape for the gritty, iconic Wu sound. Whew. And that's what I think of all the members on here. There is no weak link in the group on this album. Every single member shines on here and absolutely kills it, all the way from track 1 through to the final track of the album. It's an undeniable classic, what more can I say? Top 3 I would recommend the most here are Wu-Tang 7th Chamber, The Mystery of Chessboxing, and Protect Your Neck. But in all honesty, that's a top 3 that changes repeatedly for me, because in my opinion, this is pretty damn close to a perfect album, and I'd even say I consider it to be a 10.
Jesus got killed for our sins, Walter got killed for a coat. I'm trying to cope, but it's a part of me gone. In the pet room I'm alone.
Similarly to I Was Very Bad by IDK, Care For Me is another album that in terms of its lyrics is primarily influenced by the rapper's relationship with a family member who eventually lost their life. In this case, Saba's cousin and best friend, Walter. And with this being an emotionally charged concept album, it again makes it even stronger as a No Skips album candidate, because it's a project best listened to as an album the whole way through, soaking up all the details and emotion packed into every song. Many of the songs on here cover anxiety and depression, loneliness, that strong theme of loss that was just mentioned that runs throughout the whole album, topics that can make it a very relatable album to a lot of people. But they're all very much personalized to Saba, with each track tying into his relationship with Walter and how his death affected him. And Saba has even said that he didn't even really realize until near the completion of this album that basically every track was influenced by his feelings on what happened to Walter and that relationship. Saba is basically an open book on here, telling us stories from throughout his life and laying it all over these soothing but somber minimalistic beats.
I'm not mad at God, I just can't get out of bed. My best friend obituary really hang on my wall. By the dress, I'm trying to see it a lifeless. Broke the shit up and I walked the rest of the day with my head down. Funny how getting your ass beat a spray around. Yeah.
This was the first Saba album that I had ever listened to, and by the end of it, I already had an incredibly solid idea of who he was, what his life has been like, and what things influence him to feel the way he feels. All of that information is just relayed so perfectly across the 10 tracks on here. This is probably the one that I've talked about the least in this video, as I already covered it and gave a lot of my thoughts on it in my best rap albums of 2018 video, and I don't just want to kind of, retread what I said there. But yes, in the year and a half since that video, this project has still held up for me. Care For Me is a phenomenal piece of work. Top 3 tracks from this one are Busy/Sirens, Fighter, and Prom/King. But as with every album here, all the tracks are really great, and that's a top 3 that changes all the time. And so there we go. Those are my 4 non-skip rap albums. What does your list of no-skip rap albums look like? Let me know down in the comments below. I would appreciate you, of course, leaving a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribing and turning on notifications if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys all in the next one. And this is CDTV Productions, signing out.